Imagine it. The first pale light of March 14th, 1945, gently creeping across the worn timbers of a farmhouse-turned-shelter in Lincolnshire, England. The silence of dawn was shattered by a knock, sharp, deliberate, a sound that echoed like a verdict through the fragile calm. Inside, time seemed to stop. Greta Zimmermann's hand froze above a tin cup, tea sloshing quietly against its sides. Around her, 5 other women stiffened, as though a sudden frost had touched their spines. Breath hitched in throats, backs flattened against the plank walls, eyes locked on the door's shadowy outline. The light leaking in through the frayed edges of blackout curtains did nothing to soften the weight of that sound. The knock came again. Heavier this time. No mistaking it, official. The kind of knock that says, your fate has already been decided far from here, by people who've never seen your face, who will never ask your name. Outside, the unmistakable crunch of boots on gravel drew nearer. Then a voicemail, low, steady, English. The words were lost in the thick barn walls, but the tone, commanding, unmistakable. Greta's pulse thudded in her ears. 23 years old, half a world from home, she could almost hear the old warnings whispered in fear. What happens when a German woman is captured? What would you feel, standing there in her place, tea cooling in your hand, the world narrowing to the space between knocks? Just 6 months earlier, Greta had worn the crisp uniform of a Luftwaffe signals auxiliary. She wasn't a soldier in the strictest sense. The Reich had never allowed that, but her role was indispensable. She operated radios, decoded weather reports, kept supply lines organized and moving. Her post was just outside Calais, a place of rain and static and clipped voices over the airwaves. But when the Allies surged toward the coast in September 1944, her world came apart. Male soldiers were evacuated first, as protocol dictated. The women, 12 of them, were ordered to wait, and wait they did, in a communications bunker that reeked of burnt wires and spilled petrol as the front lines shifted and hope faded. September 18, 1944. That was the day Canadian forces arrived. Greta could still remember the sergeant who found them, barely older than she was, his face etched with fatigue. When he saw the women, his reaction wasn't shock or pity, just a nod to the translator and 5 quiet words. You're coming with us. The tone was flat, almost bored. The war had already stolen too much from him to leave space for surprise. At the processing center in Dieppe, chaos reigned. Greta was one face among hundreds captured. Wehrmacht men stood shoulder to shoulder, some limping, some glaring, most just blank-eyed. The women were quickly pulled aside, separated, and led to a cordoned area where British MPs took down names and roles in stiff, clipped English. When it was her turn, she spoke automatically. Greta Zimmermann, born 1922, Luftwaffe Nachrichtenhelferin. No immediate family. A lie or half of one. She had a younger brother, Klaus, somewhere on the Eastern Front. Best not to mention him. Better for him, safer for her. The Channel crossing came weeks later, under cover of night. A converted troop transport, no comforts, only purpose. The November seas tossed the ship like a toy. 33 German women huddled below deck in what had once been a cargo hold, nurses, clerks, auxiliaries, even a lone field doctor who had once patched up wounded men with shaking hands and a steady voice. The air down there was thick. Diesel fumes, vomit, the sour stench of unwashed skin. No one spoke. What was there to say? They'd already been warned. The rules didn't apply to them. The Geneva Convention, not guaranteed. They weren't considered Wehrmacht. Their status? Unclear. That word hung over them like smoke. One woman, Margaret, a nurse from Hamburg with soft hands and a rasping cough, had whispered at first in the dark. They say the British send women to factories. 12-hour shifts, munitions work. Greta had listened in silence, her back pressed to the steel wall of the hold, her mind already bracing for whatever came next. Another voice emerged from the dark, this one edged with steel. Better than what the Russians do. No one responded. Greta certainly didn't. She had learned in the bunker outside Calais that silence was more protective than conjecture. Words could betray you. Silence was a shield. And so she held her tongue, lips pressed tight, even as dread curled low in her stomach. November 3rd, 1944. The ship docked at Dover beneath a gray sky, weeping cold needles of rain. As she stepped off the gangplank, rain sliced at her cheeks and her breath clouded in the air. Greta and the others were marched in double file through a port bustling with energy and war muscle. British lorries roared past in convoy, American jeeps sped through puddles, crates of supplies towered like fortresses, stamped with stenciled English she couldn't decipher. But the message was clear. This was a land of plenty. Even in the grip of war, even as a prisoner she saw it, the sheer abundance, the wealth of resources, the stability that Germany had been bleeding dry for years. At the processing station, the transition from person to number began. Fingerprints, photographs, prisoner identification cards handed out by tired clerks in khaki. But then something unexpected, a woman in uniform, a British officer. Greta blinked, taken aback. This woman, sharply dressed in pressed khaki with officers' insignia on her shoulders, addressed them through a translator. The words were strange, almost surreal. You will be assigned to agricultural work. You will be housed in camps. You will work 6 days per week. You will receive wages. Wages, the word struck like a misplaced puzzle piece. Greta exchanged a wide-eyed glance with Margareta. Surely this was a misinterpretation, a deliberate mistranslation perhaps. Prisoners don't get paid. Prisoners are forced to labor, to survive, to obey. This had to be a mind game. Soften them up with kindness before revealing the true harshness. Then came the train, and with it, the second shock. Not cattle cars, seats, leather seats, old and cracked, but seats nonetheless. Windows that let in light, a toilet that flushed. British soldiers stood guard, yes, but they looked more like commuters than captors. Leaning against the walls, smoking, thumbing through newspapers, casting the women only the occasional glance. Not curiosity, not contempt, just routine. They arrived in Lincolnshire on November 7th, late in the day, with the sun casting long, golden rays across flat, windswept farmland. The camp near Spalding unfolded before them, rows of Nissan huts, shaped like corrugated metal half-loaves, ringed by wire fencing. Greta studied it, waiting for the barbed wire, the snarling dogs. But it wasn't there, just chain link. The guards, too, didn't fit the image she'd prepared for. Older men, home guard they were called. Volunteers, one of them, white-haired and weather-beaten, even tipped his cap as they passed. Inside the hut, iron bed frames. Thin mattresses, yes, but with 2 wool blankets each. A potbelly stove sat in the center, firewood stacked neatly nearby. At the far end, a wash basin and impossibly running water. Greta sat down on the edge of her assigned bed, the chill of the mattress rising through her skirt, hands trembling slightly in her lap. It couldn't be real. This must be a facade, she thought, a staging ground before some darker chapter. She waited for the cruelty to reveal itself. It never did. The shift came on the 3rd morning. At 6 a.m., a whistle blew brisk, functional. They were marched to the mess hall, a squat building that smelled of scorched toast and boiled grain. Each woman was handed a metal tray. The cook, a stout British woman with flour smudges on her apron and sleeves rolled high, moved briskly down the line, scooping portions with practiced rhythm. Greta looked down, porridge, watery and bland, a slice of bread. Then her breath caught, a pat of butter, a spoonful of jam, and unthinkably a small square of chocolate, real chocolate. Not the ersatz chicory bricks they chewed in Germany, bitter and dry and gritty. This was smooth, dark, slightly bitter. The flavor bloomed slowly across her tongue, so rich it made her eyes sting. She sat at the long wooden table, unmoving, letting the square melt on her tongue like a forbidden luxury. Beside her, Margareta wept, quietly, tears sliding down her cheeks as she nibbled at her bread and butter, as if it might vanish if she rushed. "It's real," she whispered, voice cracking. "It's real food." Across the table, Ilse Older, sharp-eyed, the clerk from Berlin who cloaked herself in sarcasm, held her own square of chocolate, like something dangerous. A landmine. Her lips parted. "Why?" she asked, but didn't finish. She didn't have to. That afternoon, the labor began. They were split into teams of 6 and assigned to work farms scattered across the region. Vast tracts of land, rolling fields yielding wheat, barley, sugar beets, potatoes, all to feed a nation still bound by ration books and shortages. Greta's group was sent to a farm owned by Thomas Whitmore, a wiry man in his 50s with deeply tanned skin and quiet eyes. He met them with the calm detachment of a man who knew work better than politics. He said little, but showed them everything. The barn where they would sort and sack potatoes, the storage sheds, the field latrines. Nothing cruel, nothing hidden, just the rhythm of a working farm. There were no uniforms, no barking orders, only mud and frost and the weight of a sack full of potatoes over your shoulder. And perhaps in the smallest corners of their guarded minds, the first fragile seed of a question: was this survival or something more? And this is where the story begins to shift. What unfolded next would defy every expectation they had carried with them across the channel. If you've come this far, stay with us. The transformation is just beginning. "You'll work 8-hour shifts," said the translator, a young British woman in a mud-spattered uniform of the Women's Land Army. Her German was crisp, formal university learned. 7 in the morning to 4 in the afternoon, with a break at midday. 2 shillings per day, minus deductions for lodging and food. 2 shillings. Paid. Again, that word. It sat in Greta's mind like a foreign object. This wasn't punishment. This wasn't forced labor. It was work and paid work at that. The logic rebelled. This couldn't be how war treated prisoners. Yet the day that followed reminded her that kindness did not erase hardship. Her hands, shaped by dials and radio wires, blistered within the first hour. The potatoes were cold, thick with November mud, and the sacks, so many sacks, seemed to multiply as the morning wore on. Her spine ached from bending. Her legs burned. The field didn't end. It just rolled out ahead of them, gray and wet under a pale sky. The rhythm of the labor became hypnotic. Bend, lift, heave, repeat, until thought slipped away and only motion remained. Then noon, a truck, lunch. They dropped their tools and gathered by the barn. Sandwiches, apples, thermoses of hot tea passed from hand to hand. The steam rose like breath into the sharp November air. They sat on bales of hay, boots caked in mud, too tired to speak. One of the British land girls, her hair a shock of red beneath a wool cap, lit a cigarette and grinned. Her name was Alice, and the grin revealed a gap between her front teeth that made her look both young and mischievous. She passed the tin around. Even the German women were offered one. Greta took hers with fingers that trembled from more than just fatigue. It wasn't the cigarette, it was the dissonance, a vertigo of emotion that made the world tilt slightly on its axis. This wasn't how the enemy was meant to behave. Prisoners weren't given cigarettes. They weren't handed mugs of tea by the people they were supposed to hate. Alice noticed her stare and smiled again, quick, sheepish. "First time on a farm?" she asked, the German halting but understandable. Greta nodded. "It's hard," Alice said, "but you get used to it. Blisters heal." So simple, so casually human. Greta looked down, blinking fast, and said nothing. She focused on the slow burn of the cigarette, the warmth of the tea in her palms, and swallowed the knot in her throat. Routine settled like snow. Wake at 6, breakfast in the mess hall, porridge, bread, sometimes an egg, always tea. Work from 7 to 4, the rhythm now less brutal, the muscle memory coming faster. Lunch in the fields. Return to camp. Dinner at 6. Soup, potatoes, sometimes meat. Vegetables when they could get them. Evenings belonged to them. The huts had electric lights, a luxury so profound that Greta could barely believe it. After years of blackout curtains and flickering lamps, she could read. The camp library, courtesy of the Red Cross, held a few German volumes, or she could write. On the 8th night, she did. "Dear Moody, I am alive. I am in England. I am working on a farm. They feed us here real food. Bread, butter, jam. You won't believe it, but it's true. I'm not being harmed. The guards are old men. Some look at us with pity. I think about Klaus every day. I pray he is safe. Your daughter, Greta." She folded it carefully and placed it in her coat pocket, alongside a worn photograph of her family, faded but unforgotten. She didn't send the letter. She didn't dare. By December, the war still loomed beyond the fences, but within them, something else began to take root. Unexpected kindnesses. Quiet rituals. A British chaplain visited and asked if any of the women wished to attend Christmas service. 10 volunteered, not out of faith, but curiosity. The church in Spalding was drafty and small. The congregation stiffened as the German women entered, but no one protested. They sat in the back pews and listened as the English carols rose around them like soft ghosts. Afterward, in the parish hall, tea and biscuits were served. Greta stood with her mug, unsure where to go, when an elderly woman approached. She studied Greta's face with a gaze that felt like searching for something lost. "My son is in Germany," she said quietly. "A prisoner, we think, near Munich." Greta looked up and met her eyes. "I hope he is treated well," she said in careful English. The woman pressed her lips together. Then she nodded. "I hope so too." Her voice softened. "And I hope someone is kind to him, as we try to be kind to you." It was not a gesture. It was a transaction, a fragile, human bargain formed in the wreckage of war. If I treat your daughter with dignity, maybe someone, somewhere, will do the same for my son. Greta carried those words back with her like a weight in her chest. By January 1945, the cognitive dissonance had become something she could no longer push aside. Each day, each meal, each shared cigarette, each moment of gentleness chipped away at what she'd been told to believe. The British were not cruel. They did not starve their prisoners. They did not treat her with hatred. And that, more than anything, was the hardest truth of all. They were, as it turned out, following the Geneva Convention to the letter, meticulously even, with a precision and consistency that exceeded what Germany had offered its own prisoners. It was Ilse who said it aloud first, her voice a whisper in the lamplight as she sat cross-legged on her bunk, darning the toe of a sock with small practiced movements. "We were lied to," she murmured, not looking up. "About everything. The Führer said the British were soft, decadent, crumbling. But look at them. Look at this place. Look how it works. They're winning not because they're lucky. They're winning because they're stronger than we are." Anna, the medical orderly from Stuttgart, shook her head. "Not stronger," she said, "just better supplied." Ilse glanced at her, the needle flashing in her fingers. "Same thing," she replied. "Strength is having enough. Strength is feeding your army, feeding your prisoners. We haven't been able to do that in years. We've been starving since '42. Greta listened but didn't speak, not because she disagreed, but because something deeper was shifting inside her, something she couldn't yet name. Her own unraveling was quieter, slower, more painful. She hadn't clung to the Reich out of fanaticism, not out of ideology or flags or slogans. She'd believed because belief was the air everyone breathed, the structure she was born into, the pride in her father's voice, the purpose in her brother's uniform. Her own role in the communications bunker, it had felt necessary, even noble. But now the scaffolding of that belief was cracking. The chocolate had been real. The wages, 42 shillings, tallied neatly in her camp account, were real. The blankets, the warm stove, the electric light. Real. And real, too, was the unease. By lamplight on the night of March the 2nd, Greta wrote in her diary, "I am afraid of what I am becoming. Not because they are cruel, but because they are not. How do I return home and say that the enemy gave me chocolate? That the enemy paid me wages? That their guards offered tea and asked if I was warm enough? How will Klaus believe me? Or Mutti? We were told stories of bombings, of Churchill's hate, of British vengeance. But here they share their rations. They smile. I don't know what to believe anymore. Of course, it wasn't perfect. No war story ever is. There were tensions, flashes of hostility that cut through the calm like sudden wind. Not every farmer was patient. Not every British face was kind. In February, near Boston, a group of women were jeered at, spat upon by a man who had lost his son at Dunkirk. The guard stepped in quickly, diffusing the scene. But the look in the man's eyes lingered with Greta long after. She couldn't blame him. She would have felt the same had the roles been reversed. But moments like that were rare. The norm, strangely, unsettlingly, was something else. A steady current of bureaucratic fairness, dull, dependable order, not kindness in the warm sense, but something colder and more unshakable. Principled decency and adherence to rules. In late February, a British officer visited the camp. Young, stiff-backed, his accent crisp. He spoke in deliberate German, standing before the assembled women with his notes in hand. They could now send parcels home through the Red Cross, he announced. There were weight limits, censorship rules, but it was allowed. We are not monsters, he added, his voice tinged with something close to defensiveness. We follow international law. We treat prisoners properly. That is what civilized nations do. After he left, Margareta turned to Greta and said, "He sounded like he was trying to convince himself." Greta shrugged. "Maybe he was," she said. And then came the morning of March 14th, 1945. The knock at dawn, not like the terrifying one so many months ago. This one was calm, procedural, a transfer. They were being reassigned not to punishment, not to harsher labor, but to a larger agricultural camp in Norfolk. More women were arriving. The Reich was collapsing. The prisoner system was expanding to make room. When the door opened, the man standing there was the same white-haired guard who had tipped his cap on their first day. He still wore the same heavy coat, still carried a clipboard like it was a shield. "Sorry for the early hour," he said in English. Then, more haltingly, in German, "Need you ready in an hour. Transport's coming. No violence, no cruelty. Just necessity, packaged in plain words. Just war moving forward. Ticking boxes, making space." Greta packed slowly, deliberately. Her possessions were few. The letter to her mother, still unsent. The photograph of her family, smooth from so much handling. The diary, pages nearly full now. And the ledger book, 42 shillings, carefully noted inside. She folded them one by one, wrapped them in a scarf, and placed them gently in her bag. Outside, dawn was breaking over the fields. The frost was melting, and birds were beginning to sing. She remembered that square of chocolate from her first morning in the fields, how its taste, dark and strange, had melted not just on her tongue, but in her mind. It had tasted like the dissolution of certainty. Everything she'd believed had begun to unravel from that moment on. By May 1945, the war was over. The camps swelled with thousands more German women clerks, nurses, auxiliaries, all caught in the collapsing final act of the Third Reich. Captured in fields, in hospitals, in retreating columns. The British system strained under the sheer number of prisoners, but it did not collapse. The routines held. The rules held. Work continued. Wages were counted. Tea was poured. In 1946, repatriation began. Slowly, bureaucratically, one list at a time. Greta left England in August of that year. She crossed the Channel by ship once more, but this time not as a prisoner, just as a former one, processed and released. Then by train through a continent scarred to its bones. Entire cities gone, fields burned, train stations reduced to jagged teeth of steel and concrete. And when she arrived in Germany, what she found was not the home she had imagined. Dresden was dust and stone. Berlin, a city she'd once known from books and radio chatter, was divided, carved into uneasy zones. Her mother somehow had survived, living in what remained of a bombed-out apartment building, 3 rooms, no doors, 1 working stove. She had grown thinner, older, quiet, with the kind of silence that absorbs grief instead of releasing it. Klaus had not returned. East Prussia had swallowed him, missing, presumed dead. When Greta told her mother about the camps in England, the meals, the wages, the way the guards had spoken with them, the chocolate, her mother had wept. Not with relief, with fear. "Don't tell people," she whispered, gripping Greta's hand with trembling fingers. "They won't believe you. They'll think you've betrayed us." But Greta did tell people, again and again, in the years that followed as Germany tried to reinvent itself, to confront the scale of what had been done in its name. Greta told the truth. that the enemy had treated her better than her own government had treated its civilians, that she had been fed while German children begged in the ruins, that she had been paid while forced laborers in Nazi camps died nameless in the mud. Some believed her, many did not, but the records remained, meticulous, undeniable. Pay slips, Red Cross correspondence, Geneva Convention inspection signed and stamped. The British had kept every receipt, every regulation followed, every prisoner accounted for, as though determined to leave behind a paper trail of decency, just in case the story needed telling later. In 1952, Greta married an English teacher she met in Hanover. She moved to Manchester. She never went back to farm work, but she never forgot it either. She kept the diary, the letter she'd never sent, the photograph, and in her 70s, she donated them to the Imperial War Museum, along with an oral history clear-voiced, steady, unforgettable. The interviewer asked her, "What was the most important thing you learned?" Greta sat quietly for a long time. Then she said, "That propaganda works until reality intervenes. We were told the British were monsters. We were told they'd enslave us, beat us, break us. But they gave us chocolate. They paid us wages. They followed rules even when it was easier not to." She paused, choosing her next words carefully. "I learned that the measure of a civilization is not what it says about itself. It's how it treats those who cannot fight back. The British weren't perfect. They bombed our cities. They made mistakes. But in those camps, in the quiet, unglamorous routines of daily life, they tried to be decent. In that boring, bureaucratic decency, it was more powerful than any ideology I had ever known." And so, if you've read this far, here is the truth. The knock came at dawn. They screamed when it came. They wept over a square of chocolate. Not because they were weak, but because something shifted in that moment. Not all at once. Not with a crash, but in the slow, steady accumulation of days, of pay slips and warm tea and small mercies passed across language barriers. In that widening space between expectation and experience, reality broke through. Greta Zimmermann was 23 years old when she learned that the enemy could be more humane than the stories had allowed. She carried that knowledge for 71 years until her death in 2016. She died with the truth still lodged, clear and sharp, at the center of her life. That war reveals not just what nations are, but what they could have been if only they told their people different stories. The work was real. The wages were real. The transformation was real slow, painful, irreversible. And in the end, that truth mattered more than anyone could have guessed when the knock came at dawn, and a new day began in a war already dissolving into memory.